There was a year when your English improved fast. You could feel it happening. And then, at some point you cannot name, it stopped. You are still studying. You still watch things in English. You are not lazy, and you have not given up. But if you compare yourself now to yourself 2 years ago, the difference is almost nothing. Here is the part nobody says out loud. That is not a motivation problem. It is not a talent ceiling, and it is not because you are too old. It is a predictable, well-documented thing that happens to almost every learner at exactly the point you are standing on, and it has a name. Let us start with what actually happened during the fast years, because the answer is hiding there. When you began, everything you encountered was new. Every sentence contained words you did not have and structures you had never seen. You had no choice but to build. Then, gradually, something changed. You accumulated enough English to handle most of what you meet. You can order food. You can read the article. You can follow the show, mostly. You can say what you mean roughly. And the moment you can handle most situations, the pressure to build anything new disappears. Think about what that actually means. For the first few years, your English grew because it had to. Every conversation contained a hole you could not talk around, so you filled it. Growth was not a discipline, it was a requirement. The day you became good enough to get through the day, that requirement quietly expired. Nothing announced it. You just stopped meeting holes you could not step around. Larry Selinker gave this its name in the 1970s. He called the language a learner builds an interlanguage, a real system of its own, sitting between your first language and the target. And he noticed that in most learners, parts of that system stopped developing permanently, even with years of continued exposure. He called that fossilization, and the word is exact. Something that was once living becomes fixed in shape, and then stays that shape no matter how long it sits there. Now here is what makes this genuinely dangerous, rather than just discouraging. Fossilization does not feel like failure, it feels like fluency. You are communicating successfully. People understand you. Nobody looks confused. Every signal you receive tells you things are working, which is precisely why you stop noticing that nothing is changing. The learner who is stuck and the learner who is advancing feel almost identical from the inside. That is why so many people spend a decade at the same level while believing they are still on the way up. And there is a cruel detail in that. The better you get, the harder your own progress becomes to see. In your first year, the difference between January and December was enormous and obvious. At your current level, a real improvement might be a slightly more natural preposition, or one structure you can now use without preparing it first. Genuine progress and no progress at all look almost exactly the same from where you are standing. So you cannot trust the feeling. You need something outside the feeling to measure against, and later in this video, I will give you one that takes 2 minutes. So how did you get here? 3 things happened, and they happened quietly. The first is that your input stopped being difficult. Think about what you actually consume in English now. Probably the same few creators, the same kind of video, the same topics you already know something about. Content you chose precisely because you can follow it comfortably. Comfortable input is not useless. It maintains what you have. But it cannot build anything, because there is nothing in it your system does not already handle. You did not decide to stop challenging yourself. Your preferences quietly optimized for comfort, the way everyone's preferences do, and the difficulty drained out of your English life without a single decision being made. The second thing is that you started avoiding without noticing. This one is uncomfortable. Every learner develops a set of structures they trust and quietly routes around everything else. You know the feeling. There is a sentence you want to say, you sense it will be complicated, and you say a simpler version instead. You do that dozens of times a day. And each time, the complicated structure gets no practice, and the simple one gets stronger. That is not laziness. It is efficiency, and it works beautifully for communication. It just also means your English is quietly optimizing itself around your weaknesses, building higher walls around them every year. The third thing is that the correction stopped. In your first years, someone was correcting you. A teacher, a course, an exercise with a right answer at the back. Now nobody does. Native speakers will not correct you. They understand what you meant, they answer the question, and the conversation moves on. Correcting an adult's grammar in normal conversation is socially awkward, so people simply do not do it. Which means every mistake you make now gets confirmed rather than fixed. You say the wrong preposition, the conversation succeeds, and your brain records that as evidence the wrong preposition works. You have been rehearsing your errors with a 100% success rate for years. And notice how strange that is compared to every other skill. A tennis player who hits the ball wrong sees it land outside the line. A musician who plays a wrong note hears it immediately. The feedback is built into the activity. Language does not work like that. A wrong sentence and a right sentence produce exactly the same outcome, which is that the other person understands you and replies. The activity itself gives you no signal at all. So unless you build the signal yourself, deliberately, you will practice the same mistakes for as long as you keep speaking. Now, the part I think matters most, and it is the one that changes what you do tomorrow. You cannot fix this by studying harder. More hours of the same thing produces more of the same thing. A Zhao Hong Han, who has spent a career studying exactly this, makes a point that should reframe the whole problem. Fossilization is selective. It is not that your English stopped. It is that specific parts of it stopped while other parts kept moving. Your vocabulary may still be growing. Your listening may still be sharpening. And meanwhile, 3 or 4 specific structures have been frozen solid since 2019, and you have never once looked directly at them. Which means the solution is not more study, it is aim. So here is what actually works. 3 things, and they are narrower than you expect. First, deliberately make your input hard again. Not slightly harder, uncomfortably harder. Find something in English where you understand roughly 70% and have to work for the rest. A subject you know nothing about. A speaker whose accent you find difficult. A book above your level. The discomfort is the whole point. If you can follow it easily, it is maintenance, not growth, and you have been doing maintenance for years. There is a simple test for whether something is hard enough. If you can watch it while cooking or scrolling, it is too easy. Real growth material demands your full attention, and you should finish it slightly tired. Second, find what you are avoiding and go directly at it. This takes about 10 minutes and almost nobody does it. Record yourself speaking English for 2 minutes about anything. Then listen back and do not look for mistakes. Look for absences. What structures never appear? Do you ever use conditionals? Do you ever use the passive? Do you ever build a sentence with more than one clause? Or is everything short and safe? The things missing from your 2 minutes are your fossilized regions. That list is the most valuable thing you can have, and you have never made it. Third, rebuild the correction that disappeared. Since nobody will correct you, you have to create the feedback yourself. Write something, and compare it against how a native speaker actually writes the same thing. Say a sentence out loud, then find the real version and notice the gap. Notice what these 3 have in common. All of them are deliberately uncomfortable. That is not a coincidence. Comfort is the exact condition that created the plateau in the first place. And notice something else. None of them takes more hours than you already spend. The recording is 2 minutes. Choosing harder input costs nothing at all. It is the same watching time pointed somewhere different. Checking one sentence against a real version takes seconds. This was never a quantity problem. You have put in the hours. They were simply pointed at the parts of your English that were already working. And now the thing to be honest about. Fossilization is real, but it is not a life sentence. Selinker's own work suggests something important. Fossilized structures resist ordinary exposure, the kind you get from just living in the language. They do not necessarily resist focused, deliberate attention aimed straight at them. Which is good news, but it comes with a condition. Ordinary exposure is exactly what you have been relying on. Watching more, reading more, hoping the years will do the work. The years will not do the work. The years are what got you here. So think back to that fast year when you could feel yourself improving. Nothing was special about you then. You were simply surrounded by English you could not yet handle, being corrected regularly. unable to avoid the hard structures because you did not have easy ones to hide behind. Every condition that made you improve was a condition of not being comfortable. And every one of them quietly disappeared as you got better. So this week, do not study more. Record 2 minutes of yourself speaking, and write down what is missing. Then go and find English that is too hard for you on purpose. That is not a step backwards. That is the only condition under which you have ever improved.